Yeah, I think we're starting a little bit behind the schedule, but just a few minutes. So, well, on behalf of the Institute and the conference board, let me start this session. And let me introduce our first speaker, Magon Rayan, right? Yes, from Villanova University, from the Department of Psychology, right? Could you please?
This is I'm not able to. Oh, sorry.
Yes, just a little bit slow.
So today I'm here to present my presentation that involves one question, which is whether gifted abilities lead to creativity. And now with a show of hands, how many of you think that giftedness leads to creativity? None of you? Okay, I guess then you're all on my side. I'm trying to push back against this narrative, which has historically been the case in creativity enrichment in schools. And so I'm looking at how talent development is mediated by transformative experiences, particularly awe and curiosity. So now, first, I'm going to give a little bit of background for you guys. It's just that first, we have to understand that it's very important to nurture creative potential. The reason is that it forms the bedrock of realizing the collective human potential that we all have. And we have to do that in children because that's where it starts. Otherwise, you're limiting creativity at a very young age. And so the question that then arises is that what drives creative productivity? Is there like this direct link from giftedness, or is there some kind of indirect causation, which is what I'm trying to argue. So now I've already said that creativity has historically been looked at through this lens of giftedness, and usually through an IQ-based model, which is that you're highly intelligent, so we're going to give you enrichment opportunities to become creative. But that's not something that you should endorse because it's limiting those enrichment opportunities to just people that are highly intelligent. And so the creativity intelligence distinction was created as a way to identify that giftedness or intelligence and creativity, they're two separate constructs. And so these two separate constructs show that giftedness or high intelligence doesn't always lead to creativity. Specifically in schools, a lot of children that are in these programs, they don't demonstrate creative behavior. So obviously they're two distinct categories, but they sometimes correlate. And so Wallach and Kogan showed that there's categories of high creativity, low intelligence, low creativity, high intelligence, high creativity, low intelligence, low creativity. So it can exist in all of these patterns. And there's also this threshold theory, which says that above 120 points, maybe there's like no correlation, but below that, if you're low in intelligence, you'll probably not be creative, which is not the case. We can see that there is a possibility of low intelligence and high creativity, right? And so additionally, correlation does not really imply necessity. So even if there might be a correlation, it doesn't mean that you need intelligence per se to be creative. So basically, creativity is not exclusively dependent on intelligence, and other factors play a major role. So let's consider them. Now I'm going to talk about just again this context of giftedness, which is that a lot of students don't demonstrate a lot of gifted students don't demonstrate creative behavior, but there might be an indirect link between talent development. Now again, it's talent we're focusing on, not intelligence or giftedness. So it's important to have certain talents and abilities for creativity to manifest itself. And I'm going to look at it by talking about latent talent, which will come later. And also the social status of being gifted in schools, it's quite limiting, and it can take opportunities away from people that are marginalized, such as African American people or people from low-income backgrounds. So it's very important to redirect the objectives of gifted programming from from this kind of focus on intelligence and to this focus on encouraging creative behavior instead. And so I'm going to show that awe and curiosity are particular transformative experiences that mediate this kind of development of creative behavior. And perhaps we could eliminate the notion of a gifted student at all. We won't identify people as gifted. Instead, we would say that we would put everybody in these programs, identify their talents, and show how they could perhaps demonstrate creative behavior. So basically the aim of this paper, which looks at creativity through a process view of creativity, which I'm going to define later, is that first, we have to ensure that educational programs have creativity development that's accessible to everybody, and that you nurture creative potential beyond the confines of this giftedness label, and still remain within this kind of framework of gifted programming, because we don't want to get rid of these initiatives that are already there, where they're very helpful, but they're just pretty limiting. So we have to make them expansive and help them include other people that are not included. Secondly, we want to promote creative and academic talent development through transformative learning, which is by understanding this kind of mediating role of transformative experiences. Okay, so now first we're going to look at what this process view of creativity is. Now, creativity is generally defined through the 4 Ps, which is process, product, person, and press. So product is the creative outcome, process is the thing that's leading you to that, person is that are you creative or not, and press is the environment. What I'm going to focus on is the process, and E.P. Torrance, he's a very popular researcher. He came up with the Torrance test of creative thinking, which is now used in gifted identification. So instead of intelligence, we now use this, which is still problematic. I'll come to that later. But what he did was he said that creativity is a process that is not just limited to people that are eminent creators, but everybody. And he described the process as the process of sensing difficulties, problems, and gaps in information. So first you see that there is a gap, and then you make guesses and formulate hypotheses to test whether this is true. And this is because we sense an incompleteness, a sense of, something's missing, and that arouses tension. And I think our planetary lecture today, they were talking about this kind of negative experience, but that negative experience is not necessarily negative. It is this tension that is being aroused when something's out of place. And so we want to find a way to encourage that tension and relieve it. So we'll be uncomfortable, but we will seek ways and avenues to relieve that tension that will lead to creativity. So basically, now we need to focus on the process. Why? Because the standard definition, which has been product focused, it's great because it focuses on domain-specific outcomes, which means that, if you're intelligent or creative in math, you will be creative in math. You won't be creative in another domain. So that is important to have, but it moves away from this kind of influence that is domain transcending, that is kind of universal, and we don't look at that if we just focus on the product. So we need to focus on the process. So next, I'm going to again mention that these cognitive processes that I'm talking about, they're just not just abilities. You can't test them through these measures, like I said, the Torrance test of creative thinking or divergent thinking. So that is also a limitation, because what you need is that creativity involves the stimulation and arousal that leads you towards action. And if you just look at abilities, that's not enough. You need something that's motivating you, it's moving you towards action and spurring action. So it's important to frame that the creative process usually has a generative outcome. You don't really know what's going to end up happening. So if you're focused on the product, you're just like, I'm going to create this painting. It's going to look exactly like this, and you're going to create exactly that. You're not really seeing, you're not really seeing that there's an emergent phenomena where the outcome could be, it could go in any direction. And that's something we need to focus on. And Sternberg criticized this kind of over-reliance on these creative tests as well, because it makes the same mistake that we've done through testing for IQs. And so now I'm going to talk about this componential model of creativity, which is kind of a basis of this mediation, which talks about creative potential and achievement, which is mediated through these cognitive processes, which involves transformative experiences, as I'm going to state later. And the importance of mediation is just that, because people can have this potential but never do anything with it. And so we need to focus on what exactly drives that potential towards achievement, towards behavior. And so with this kind of process view in mind, I'm going to operationalize the independent variable as latent talent instead of giftedness or anything else. And this kind of project is a proof of concept. I haven't really measured this or tested this empirically, but hopefully it gives a new perspective. So now, before we talk about the mediation, I want to give some more background about how this works. First, we look at the creative attitude, which is it forms the bedrock of this creative process to manifest itself. And in this image, you can see there's cognition, and then there's behavior at the very end. But the thing that's mediating is affects, which are emotional in nature. So that's why I'm going to focus on epistemic emotions, which are like awe, curiosity, wonder, things like that, which end up being transformative experiences. Research has shown that those are very transformative experiences. And so creativity is technically an attitude towards life. If you don't have that attitude, you're never going to lead from cognition to behavior. And basically, this entire process, it integrates emotions from cognition to behavior, and it establishes the foundation for this mediation to take place. So another thing we need to understand before we look at the mediation is that there's a temporal phenomena involved in creativity. You go from time 1 to time 2. It doesn't just happen in space, it happens in time. And so this temporality, though, it's very iterative. It is not linear. You don't just go from one point to another. And generally, there's a stage-based model that looks at this linear kind of temporality. But Whitehead, he described this in terms of the present moment, which is, it doesn't involve the future, it doesn't involve the past. It kind of takes it all together because potentiality and fulfillment, they kind of exist at the same time. That's the nature of iteration that I'm kind of explaining. And even though linear models are common when we look at creativity, the iterative models actually integrate into these linear models. So both models have components of each other. And basically, when I talk about iterativity, it just means that there is this emergent nature. It's kind of chaotic. Everything happens at the same time, if that makes any sense. But Whitehead also has this quote which talks about process in a very determinate way. It looks like it's kind of linear, you know? He says that it's the realization of a determinate individuality, and it's the attainment of this final end. So there's an essence, there's a potential, and that potential manifests itself in that kind of individuation way. But is that really the case? Let's see. So this question that we've seen about iteration, it also brings the question about whether creativity is domain specific. Because if it is in one domain, you have mathematical talent, you have mathematical abilities, you become talented in mathematics, it's pretty linear. You don't see the iteration that we're describing. So where does the iteration lie? I'm going to mention that it involves both the process and the outcome, and the final product could be predetermined or it could not have a set goal state. But this is not really a contradiction. There is a clarification required here. It is mostly that this dual nature needs to be understood to understand where the domain specificity lies and where certain domain transcending aspects come into play. And so we know products, they're domain specific. They end up in one place. They started in one place. But the thing that happens behind is what is domain general. And in recent years, we started to focus on domain specificity because in intelligence, we made that mistake. We thought of there's a G factor. You're intelligent in all domains. It doesn't matter where your talents lie. And so we don't want to make the same mistake with creativity. But taking that perspective, it misses out on these domain transcending influences that are everywhere. And we can use those to look at our enrichment opportunities in school where everybody can experience it, and they don't have to be in specific programs for specific things, and they can all be in one program, and it can be universalized. And so perhaps the better question is that which aspects of creativity are domain general and which aspects are domain specific? Because the domain general aspects, they affect the inputs, and the domain specific aspects affect the outputs. Like, I know I'm throwing so many words out there. I hope it's not too chaotic, but basically, when I say it affects the input, is that it's affecting the process. So anything domain general, which includes transformative experiences, it's incorporated in the process, but ultimately the talent and the end, they remain linear. They are both in one specific domain. So I've shown here through the 4C model of creativity where the domain general and domain specific aspects lie. So basically there's 4 types of creativity. Personal creativity is everyday. In Hindi, we have this concept of jugaad, where it's like, we're so poor, so we're going to come up with creative solutions to figure out what to do. And that's like personal creativity, you experience it. Everyday creativity is you're taking those personal elements and applying it to situations. Maybe in school, you're writing a paper, you're doing all of that. And then expert creativity happens where you become more and more familiar with the subject. It becomes more and more domain specific. So the first two, it's everyday creativity. It is more domain general. And then as it progresses further, it becomes more domain specific. So experts, obviously, it's in a particular domain that they're experts in. And then eminent creativity is the historical greatness, people that have achieved their goal and extreme creativity in one specific area. And so it becomes increasingly domain specific, and that's what I've shown here. Okay, next. And so now why look at these domain transcending influences? We've seen creativity is seen as domain specific, but what is the importance of this? It's that it actually incorporates the honing process. You can hone creativity. We know that creativity is not just something you have or don't have. It's something you can develop in people, and that's where these domain transcending influences take place and have a role. So the initial phase of creative thinking is driven by an urge to explore ideas, to reduce this psychological entropy that I described, this tension that is aroused in the first place. And you try to reduce that, and the honing process then takes place, but this honing process, again, is iterative in nature because it focuses on factors beyond the problem domain. Again, the problem domain is the specific domain you're trying to focus on. And you can have motivational factors, other things inspiring you from anywhere, right? So it doesn't have to be in that specific area. And then creativity training is also something that should look at these iterative factors because that will allow us to create a universal model of teaching and training where you're not just putting people in specific specialized programs, but you can have that for everybody. And now answering this question about Whitehead and his realization of distinct individuality, I would like to say that it technically leads to a definitive outcome. That is because there is a particular potential that you're actualizing, not just any random potential, but how it manifests itself, it can manifest in a diverse array of forms. So again, there is no contradiction here. If you understand the dynamics, you understand there's not really all of that contradiction with this stuff. And lastly, research has shown that creativity can be honed, and the process view allows us to see that there is a focus on the internal transformation, not necessarily the product, and that's what I'm going to focus on, this internal transformation we experience when you're going through the creative process. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what are transformative experiences and how they facilitate epistemic expansion. So humanistic psychology has had this notion of transformative experiences in the past. William James, he introduced it first in the varieties of religious experiences, and Maslow, he coined the term peak experiences, which are these heightened states of arousal where you have inspiration, wonder, and awe, and these are characterized as epistemic emotions that I'm going to focus on. And so this need for accommodation, you probably know Piaget, assimilation accommodation, has been identified as a precursor to this framework of transformative experiences and this tension and this disequilibrium. Now you see here in this image, there's first a transformative experience, and then there's a stable worldview. That will lead to some kind of destabilization type of experience, which can either fit neatly into your previous schemas, and then you have no problem. It assimilates neatly into whatever you already know, no issues, stable worldview is maintained. But if there's a need for accommodations that's triggered, like you realize that something's missing, there's something not matching up with what I believe in, it'll trigger this need for new structure and create epistemic expansion, which is that your knowledge space in your head, it evolves and it opens itself to new horizons. So this epistemic expansion is very important when we look at transformative experiences because L.A. Paul, she's worked on transformative experiences a lot. She focuses on decision theory per se, but she says that personal choices and this readiness of change is very important. And first, you'll have this kind of epistemic transformation. You'll change your worldview. But eventually, that'll lead to a personal transformation. Like your entire personality, your entire individuality is going to be changed through these experiences. So now, we can see through this, though, there is this disequilibrium, which can almost seem so destabilizing that it's negative. And there's a lot of psychological challenges that end up coming. And there's also involuntary transformative experiences that can happen, like being thrown into a traumatic situation or something like that. What do you do there? So in that situation, we have to see how can we use transformative experiences to facilitate creativity so that perhaps all of this destabilization it's causing will go somewhere positive, will lead to positive outcomes. So now this is where I'm going to explain what I'm talking about when I say mediation. First, we'll look at this image, then I'll explain what I've written there. The reason I'm focusing on latent talent is that I don't believe in the blank slate view of the mind. I think we all have some kind of innate talent, and Steven Pinker argued that perhaps if we acknowledge innate differences, it'll lead to some equity concerns. Maybe some people are better than others. But I don't really believe that, because if you don't look at these real variations, you're not developing people in an authentic way. You're just making them practice, do whatever, and then develop certain things that are not authentic to them. So it's important to look at differences in variation. So that's why I have latent talent there. But it's latent. Again, it's just potential. Just because you have talent doesn't mean it's going to yield anything. And that then it needs to be triggered somehow, which involves a creative attitude. So if you're not open to experiences, you don't have creative attitude, you will not experience transformative experiences. And then once you experience transformative experiences, it triggers the creative process, which leads to creative products. Now, you can argue that this whole thing is the creative process. I've just made the distinction so that it's a little bit more clear. And now when you see this mediation, you see talent and creative productivity, there's not a direct causal link. Just because you have talent doesn't mean there'll be creative products. The only reason that's happening, or you have talent and there's creative productivity, is that there are transformative experiences. And so research has shown that curiosity and awe, they're two particular key epistemic emotions and transformative experiences that influence the development of talent and creativity. And that is something we need to focus on in schools, because it enhances certain cognitive processes like information seeking and belief revision. And it also has certain elements of intrinsic motivation and transformative learning that are very essential to creativity enrichment in schools. Now, intrinsic motivation is something that's very important in early childhood education because it motivates people from an authentic place rather than grades and external factors. And Amabile suggested that these are key motivators that connect potential to achievement. So these transformative experiences are also motivational factors. Secondly, transformative learning is something that has been emphasized in the field of education through disorienting dilemmas. Now, these dilemmas are disorienting because you're challenged with a question, you change your perspective, and you're so confused. And you need that confusion to learn anything. If you don't have that, you won't learn anything. So in the field of education as well, this kind of change of the frame of reference and meaning perspectives that you have is emphasized through transformative learning that we're going to look at later, how it's going to help enrich creativity in schools. Okay, now I'm going to emphasize why exactly do we want to focus on talent? Like, why not get rid of talent entirely? Because giftedness, I guess, doesn't matter. Then what matters? And maybe we don't need talent. Maybe we can just make people do creative things and who cares what they're talented at? But the reason we need talents is that, okay, sorry, I guess I'm going too fast even though I'm talking so fast.
Continue.
Well, I'll try to go over this very quickly, but basically he talks about the theory of positive disintegration where destabilizing experiences can be positive. And so by creating these internal conflicts, you lead to a higher cognitive structure, which is called the third factor, which is this authentic individuation of your true essence. And so in his framework, essence precedes existence. Even though in philosophy we've seen existence precedes essence, here essence is more important. And so what I've looked at here is that these overexcitabilities, which is very key to his framework, is very closely tied to transformative experiences. And so if we have overexcitability and we trigger that in people, we can focus on talent and develop them in an authentic way. And now I know I'm running out. I'm just quickly going to go over this. It's just that there is a school-wide enrichment model that has been used in schools that is really great. I really like it. And that kind of champions this notion of gifted education without gifted students. And so you don't label the students, you label the services that they need. And they have total talent portfolio, and there's an enrichment triad model. Obviously, I'm not going to go into that. And what I did later was that use this model of mediation to give some recommendations. And obviously, I'm not going to go over that again. But the problem with implementing this is that there are certain psychoeducational challenges. For example, people that seem like, they're very ADHD, their mind is wandering, teachers don't like that. And, if anything, there are twice exceptional students that have disabilities, but also have really highly creative talents. So you need to support them, and we need to take that into account when we have these models. And the last challenge is pedagogical resistance, which is that non-conformity is very important for creativity, and schools don't like that, teachers don't like that. And you need to defy the crowd, you need to defy yourself, and you need to defy the world. And doing that is difficult, and doing that in schools is a lot more difficult. So we need to find a way to enrich creativity, taking all of these things into consideration and looking at the mediation I just described. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you could continue during the discussion later. And before we continue, can I clear this? Maria, right? Eva, Maria. Yeah. And we only have two presenters, right? The Eva.
There was supposed to be a third one, but
yeah. Okay. So Eva, Maria. Okay. So then we are moving to the next. Yes, sure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So just a moment. Let me introduce our next presenter. Yes. Yeah. All right. Eva Maria Jurešić, right? Yes, Jurešić. So she represents the University of Zagreb, right? So they are, as far as I remember, the Department of Sociology in the Faculty of Philosophy.
Yes.
Something like that. Okay. So could you please start your presentation?
Yes, thank you. So in this talk, I will be dealing with the socio-political significance of the concept of intelligence and its role within different educational policies. I will begin by retelling my personal experience with intelligence testing, which is what actually motivated me to explore this topic in the first place. Then I will provide a short history of the phenomenon and its relation to processes of legitimizing those in power and marginalizing others. And after that, I will focus on the different principles of ranking and classifying students based on their intelligence levels, as well as outline some possible alternatives to these practices. And I'm giving this talk with the hope of contributing to two main goals. The first one is the abandonment of the concept of intelligence. And the second one is the rethinking of the criteria based on which we categorize and classify students. So last year, I applied for a scholarship program for gifted students funded by the city of Rijeka. And the criteria for the scholarship included good grades, professor recommendation letters, additional academic and non-academic achievements, and an intelligence test, named Test of General Capabilities. Now, what these general capabilities turned out to refer to was primarily the ability to solve numerical problems in a limited amount of time, because finding the odd one out or continuing a series of numbers required adding, multiplying, and dividing numbers by heart quickly. A third of the test did aim to evaluate our verbal intelligence, but this mainly meant testing our knowledge of some archaic vocabulary. I didn't end up getting the scholarship, and I don't know whether this was because of my math panic, probably resulting in a disastrous score on the general capabilities test, which I believe has classified me as generally incapable, or because other candidates ranked higher on the other criteria. But I don't believe it's a coincidence that out of 17 available scholarships, 13 of them went to students of technical and natural sciences. The scholarship of the city of Rijeka, and the call for that you see here, is by no means exceptional in the way that it places the concept of intelligence in the center of its definition of merit and the corresponding selection process. And I believe it to be worthy of exploring what is it that allows these educational policymakers to define an intelligence test as a test of general capabilities and to base a scholarship program on awarding. And I will attempt to historicize this phenomenon and to think about both its beneficiaries and its victims. The inventor of intelligence theory, Francis Galton, was a 19th century eugenics pioneer. He used anthropometric and phrenological techniques as estimators of intelligence. And he built the ground for eugenic policies and scientific racism of the early 20th century USA and Nazi Germany. For example, differences in IQ were the fundamental argument for the state sterilization decision brought in 1927 by the American Supreme Court under the slogan, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." And this was a very popular opinion. Here you see a poster of the American Eugenics Society from the 1930s. And not surprisingly, there was a consensus among 20th century scientists that a low IQ is far more common among non-white and immigrant ethnic groups. So when the US Army recruited new soldiers in 1917 and tested their IQs, 89% of Afro-Americans and 47% of Eastern Europeans were categorized as morons with the mental age of 13-year-olds. One of the most respected European anthropologists in the 19th century, Paul Broca, claimed that the brain was bigger in younger adults compared to the elderly, in men compared to women, in eminent compared to average men, in superior compared to inferior races, and that the size of the brain shows a remarkable connection with intelligence. So we see that the possibilities of using this very vaguely defined but convincingly numerical criterion in explaining and legitimating social hierarchies were endless. The Bell Curve, Intelligence and Class Structure in American Life, published in 1994 by psychologists Richard Herrnstein and political scientist Charles Murray, is a contemporary pseudoscientific legitimation of class society based on proclaimed differences in intelligence. The book calls for the US government to stop trying to improve the living conditions of the poor, because poor women who have a lower IQ are thus encouraged to give birth to more mentally inferior children. Another political aim of the book is a maximum reduction of immigration from South America and Africa, because according to the authors, immigrants are less likely to be intelligent than the average American, and their arrival therefore lowers the US average and inhibits national development. So the idea of differences in intelligence has always been deeply engraved in the ideologies of white supremacism, capitalism, and patriarchy. Today, psychometrics, the discipline of mental measurement, which has inherited intelligence theory from the likes of Galton and Broca, elaborated the theory into a series of increasingly complex scales and instruments, but it never moved away from the initial premise of the capacities of the human mind being quantifiable and utilized in constructing hierarchies. And some of the most common purposes of using intelligence today take place within the educational system. And they include, on the one hand, assigning special education programs to those lacking in intelligence, and on the other hand, singling out the intelligent ones, often named the gifted ones, and they deserving scholarships, additional educational opportunities, or university slots. In 2007, a group of African-American students and their parents filed a lawsuit against their school, accusing it of systematically identifying its Black students as intellectually challenged, placing them in special classes and failing to prepare them for their futures. In the Balkan countries like Croatia, it is the Roma children that continuously score lower on intelligence tests than the ethnic majority, and are assigned special education programs 3 times as often as the majority. And this prevents them from applying to university preparation high schools and forces them into low-paying and often unsafe manual work, regardless of their personal desires and ambitions. And another consequence of this is the irreversible stigmatization of the children who are marked intellectually inferior. But things aren't better on the other side of the bell curve. According to the historian Jim Porter, the American post-war invention of the gifted child was motivated by 2 main historical circumstances. One was the Cold War competition of the US with the East Bloc, perhaps most tangible in the so-called space race. The requirement for technical innovation that this competition demanded and scientific advancement was to be fulfilled by grouping, or rather recruiting, technically talented children and specifically supporting their education. The other circumstance was the abolition of racial segregation in schools. The anxiety of white America over this change was consoled by a new possibility to use intelligence testing and special treatment of gifted children as a new segregation tool. And it worked because of the way the tests were conceived, and due to large inequalities in living standards and educational opportunities between white and Black children, the great majority of those identified as gifted were white. And since then, we haven't found a way to test intelligence so that it doesn't reinforce existing hierarchies. And that's because that was never the idea behind it. Of course, with time, intelligence theory has been refined, and some of the changes it was forced to adopt after World War II, due to PR crisis of eugenics, were switching the focus from subnormal to supranormal, because it doesn't sound as oppressive, and defining intelligence in terms of individual rather than group characteristics. However, none of that changed the real consequences of the concept's instrumentalization. So what to do with intelligence? Well, some would say that the proven fact that IQ is a fairly valid predictive measure of academic and professional success is enough to keep it in use, for example, as a scholarship criterion. Because why shouldn't we offer additional support to those likely of achieving something great? Don't we use school grades as the same type of criterion? And there is a correlation between intelligence and success, if we define success as good grades and high earnings. But an even better predictor of success is the socioeconomic status of the child's parents. Physical attractiveness is another trait that has been shown to positively correlate with both academic and professional results. So if we see intelligence as an inborn trait, then it would be just as fair to give out scholarships based on the beauty of one's face or the size of the house they grew up in. And despite both of these facts indicating that the student could be successful, they don't say anything about their merit or about the potential benefit that the public would get from supporting them from public resources. And if, on the other hand, we perceive intelligence as a set of skills acquired in early childhood, for example, that means that when testing IQ, we're actually using it as a proxy of other environmental factors and saying that an intelligent child is one that grew up with parents who used sophisticated vocabulary or took him to mental math classes. And again, we're awarding privilege, not merit. So why do we still stick to constructs like intelligence and giftedness, or who benefits from them? Well, these constructs offer support for the neoliberal myth of meritocracy. Oppression and exploitation are legitimated through the belief that if only they were intelligent or gifted enough, working or poor individuals would immediately climb the social ladder. Blurry enough to be undebatable, these characteristics can be called for as a last resort when justifying the lack of promised success. Then there is the idea of national economic growth that's built on the same principle. So if only we identified our gifted children and supported their development, Croatia would become Sweden. And this serves to mask the real geopolitical and economic reasons for the non-Swedish status of Croatia and other peripheral countries. The next beneficiary is corporate economy. It requires the production of technical knowledge to boost productivity rates without the need to invest more or hire new workers. So programs that identify and support children with high levels of logical mathematical skills contribute in the long term to production of profitable knowledge, which benefits the capitalist class more than anybody. And here is one of the many examples of projects, it's in Croatian, of identifying gifted students in Croatian schools, which was actually based on testing their mathematical skills and offering additional classes in mathematics to those with high results. And it's a very common practice. Another winner is the global multi-billionaire industry of psychometrics, built on producing and distributing intelligence tests. Just a fun fact to mention is the educational testing service, which basically holds a global monopoly over the business, is a non-profit company on paper, but it has numerous overseas subsidiaries that are very much for-profit and have enormous income rates, but because of its legal status as a non-profit, it is accepted from paying federal income taxes. So if the construct of intelligence is inherently a discriminatory one, then what can we replace it with? I argue that we shouldn't replace it, but we should rather figure out a system in which we don't have the need for it or anything like it. And how do we build that system? Well, the first step is providing the educational system with necessary funding. The pressure for rational resource allocation is one of the main reasons for schools to insist on segregating unintelligent children to special classes and offering additional support only to the selected gifted ones. Public schools and publicly funded scholarship programs don't have the money they need to provide necessary support for all students. Classes are overcrowded, schools are lacking in infrastructure, professors are overworked and underpaid. And this situation forces them to choose which children are worthy of their scarce resources and which ones are just a nuisance to be removed from class and put into programs for the mentally challenged. In a system revolving around profit, the criterion on which they will base that choice will be profitability. So we need to identify the students to invest in, whose success will be measurable and bring the most profit. And we need to do it time and cost efficiently, which is where the standardized intelligence tests come into handy. And we need to discard those who can't deliver planned learning outcomes in the way and in the time that they're supposed to. So as a short-term strategy, simply securing more funding for schools would already reduce the need for efficiency maximization that leaves so many students traumatized and sabotaged. This is just a picture from a protest of teachers in Croatia for bigger salaries. A more long-term ambition must be a complete restructuring of the educational system, which cannot happen without the political and economic restructuring of society. If the purpose of education wasn't producing workers and profitable knowledge, but raising self-aware, curious, responsible individuals, then it would be actually counterproductive to separate some students from the rest based on some arbitrary test assessing their abilities on a single scale or a few scales. So completely avoiding all ability-based separation of students doesn't just sound nice in theory. Research proves that even the children that really suffer some intellectual difficulties benefit largely from participating in regular classes with the rest of their peers. And not only that, but the rest of the students also perform better academically and participate in classes more actively when sharing classrooms with colleagues with learning difficulties. But more importantly, classes of students with diverse abilities, talents, interests, needs creates an opportunity for children to cooperate, help and understand each other, and to build confidence and trust. So what about public scholarships? Which criteria should they adopt if we were to give up on using intelligence tests? First of all, everyone must be able to afford an education. In Croatia, thousands of parents are going hungry to be able to afford school books for their children. 16% of Croatian children live at the risk of poverty, and for a lot of them, lack of money is a serious obstacle in pursuing the education they desire. This makes it unacceptable that the city of Rijeka, from the beginning, with its 100,000 inhabitants, offers only 6 scholarships based on socioeconomic criteria, while the 17 gifted scholarships don't take the candidate's socioeconomic status into account. So education on all levels must be free and accessible to everyone. And socioeconomic scholarships wouldn't achieve that alone, of course, but still programs that support students living in poverty or near it should be the absolute priority of local and national governments, because no one's good grades should be rewarded if not everyone got a chance to get good grades. And then only if we achieve full accessibility of education and maximally reduce the inequalities of life chances, we could decide that we want to direct part of our collective resources into offering extra support to certain students based on merit. However, the criteria for selecting those students should never pretend to be objective or, God forbid, quantitative, such as their IQ or GPA. The only sensible way of offering scholarships with public money is thinking of the public's interests and needs and benefits. So be it interesting art, quality teaching, or dependable house repairing, we could have groups of experts from various areas that could evaluate the candidate's work and potential within their specific area of interest, and based on their decisions provide scholarships, mentorships, residencies, additional educational programs, and other types of support. And this, the aim of this type of policy wouldn't be pushing individual careers, but encouraging those whose thinking and acting could be of exceptional benefit to entire communities. So I have argued that intelligence isn't an ahistoric and natural fact, but rather a politically charged construct, designed to artificially rank people's minds on universalized quantitative scales, which has highly discriminative implications. Except for those whose power status will thus be incriminated, we all benefit from perceiving differences between people as qualitative, not quantitative, from making schools places of care and understanding, not of selection and profitability, and from ensuring everyone has access to any educational path they desire. And of course, the road to a more just educational system is long, but I believe we will get there faster if we lose the often hidden weights dragging us back, and intelligence is one of them. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much to both speakers. Very interesting, intriguing topics, both of them. And well, I just want to make sure that the third team of presenters is not here. No, okay. So we have more time for discussion, and so I encourage everybody who has any questions, please don't be shy. Ask your questions. Yeah.
Well, first I want to tell you that your presentation was very creative. It's pun intended. I have a problem with the concept of gift in psychology because for me, I find that gift, that concept, can, especially as a, how to put it, brain's capacity cannot be explained in terms of the theory of natural selection and evolution. So I'm interested in how do psychologists explain the existence of a gift in humans? Because when we speak about gifts, we speak about something specific, like gifts for playing violin, for dancing, for doing photos. Actually, that's a skill, but those arts cannot be explained in terms of reproductive value, survival value, natural selection. When we look from that standpoint.
I don't think that's how you should define gifts in the first place. And I disagree with most of the field of psychology. The way they do it is pretty based on evolution. Is that some people, eugenics like you talked about, is that some people are better than others. The reason I'm identifying talents in my research is that I think everybody has potential, obviously to varying degrees and in different areas. And it's never as clear cut as potential for dancing, potential for music. Those things happen eventually. Again, I explained outcomes are domain specific, the process isn't. So the nature of talent, it's a chaotic cognitive state. You can't really identify or define it. But ultimately the importance, for example, we have a total talent portfolio in the school-wide enrichment model that emphasizes a more qualitative assessment of where the student's interest, passion, and all of those things lie. So perhaps we can't measure this kind of reproductive, innate tendency, but we can measure for their passion, for their natural inclinations, which can allow you to, enhance those talents through enrichment activities. I don't know if I'm answering your question properly. I just don't agree with the evolutionary view at all.
I agree with you on the concept of talent, how you define it, because I'm speaking from a personal experience. When I was a kid, I used to draw very well, better than other kids. And I also had a friend in my elementary school who was a little bit better drawer than me. Then in life he continued with his education with the drawing, and he became better. Over time, I didn't, and over time I lost my skill.
Yeah.
And looking at things from the past, someone could tell that I had a talent, a gift in drawing. But over time I realized that gifts don't exist. Basically, how things go. Children just play around, live their life, and they find something that they find interesting. Exactly. And they start doing it, like drawing, football, basketball. And basically, skill comes with practice in doing it. And there is no, how to put it, that's how the thing works. A child, there is this, how to put it, a false presentation of gift and talent in children, because what is going on, children are doing some things that they find interesting. That is the more important concept, interest. They find interesting, and over time they develop, they get better, develop a skilled, simply because they are doing that thing in the period of their life when their brain has the highest capacity of connections between neurons. And that's how gifts developed or come around, how to put it, but actually they don't exist.
Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I both disagree and agree with what you're saying. I think ultimately when you look at individual talent and interests, it is very important to not just focus on practice, because I think a lot of people, and my dad used to say this, I don't want to say this in front of the camera, but he was like, I can make you into whatever I want you to be. And so if you overdid it over and over, you will learn that, you will be skilled at that. And so I feel like that kind of notion of talent development, it doesn't help. You need to posit some kind of innate, again, potential interest. Where does your drive lie? And that's why I'm focusing on the creative drive. And so naturally we focus on money and other things to, employ ourselves in the future, and we forget about what our natural inclinations are. And so that's my account of talent, and the development of talent is to find where our true drive and passion lies. And so I agree with that interest account of talent. But I guess with the practice narrative, I kind of slightly disagree.
Oh, we have one question in the back over there. Yes.
Can I just, before you ask your question, add something about this? Sorry. Yeah,
Sure.
I just wanted to say how I have a problem with this metaphysical dimension of gift. Like even in the word, like whose gift is that? And who defined it as a gift? Like who, somebody in the sky like gives you this gift? And also then this has this like liberal, like, you know, you have one gift, your true passion, your calling, like all these expressions that really like, make you as a person value as much as your true calling that you just have to find, and then you do this all your life, you become super specialized and make it your career and you advance it, and it's this type of, you know, framework where this is, you can't, you know, do different stuff and even do it badly and not do it to like profit out of it either, and it's just, you know, I think we should just move outside of this framework completely. That's just about giftedness, but you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question, please.
Thank you for the presentations. I have two questions actually, and there are questions for both of you. So I hope I don't take all the time of the discussion with the two questions, and I'll try to be quick. The first question is about, I noticed that in both presentations, the idea of intelligence or measurement is very linked to the individual testing or measurement, right? So I was thinking about, for example, approaches like Liebman and Sharp, when they say they have a program of philosophy for children. And the interesting thing is that they say that at the end of the program, the end of the application of the program, the skills or the competences or the intelligence, you could say, developed could not be measured individually. So after the program, if you tested all the people that were in the program, you wouldn't see any changes. But if you tested the group, you would be able to see changes. And I think about, for example, OXPs or this kind of international evaluation. The more close you have to this is like collaborative problem solving, this kind of metrics that are ridiculous. And even in this kind of measures, if you look at the results in third world children, they are above first world children, and they find justifications that are pretty much ridiculous for this. So I wanted to ask you about the idea of group assessments of intelligence, if it makes sense to you and how it applies. And the second, I try to be very quick, is the idea of, because I was remembering the occasion of the visit of some very important scholars. I mean, we all know some people, when they come to places like my home university, for example, in Brazil, they were faced with people with, I don't know, points of view, questions or approaches that they afterwards said that made them feel stupid. They were presenting some things and people were like, yeah, but can you say this? And they felt like stupid because they weren't in a place, I mean, where they weren't the intelligent people. At the same time, me as a foreigner here, many times I feel like stupid. I mean, in my language, I'm very much more smart in my language than now in this broken English. But at the same time, I feel like because I'm a moron, sometimes I can do things that are not allowed to intelligent people here. So I can invent words. I can, I don't know, do things in the in the fields I am because I'm a moron. So I wanted to ask you about this. What can the stupid, what can the moron, what can the, I don't know, not intelligent people can do because of the evaluation of people as intelligent? Like, what is the downside for the intelligent people of the measurement of intelligence?
Yeah, first about the second question, that reminds me of when I was reading about the children who are identified as gifted, also at a very early age, sometimes even in kindergarten, they get these children say, you have this special gift and now we're going to develop it, you're going to go to extra classes. And they were actually traumatized by this. Mm-hmm. Like their whole life, they had this pressure. And oftentimes they weren't even, you know, exceptional individuals at all, because this kind of just like paralyzed them, this pressure of precisely the opposite of what you are saying. They don't have this freedom to say whatever, make a mistake, try something, not be good at it, because, you know, they are categorized as outstanding and gifted, and now they are, you know, this pressure doesn't do good for them, and it doesn't do good for the others who are not gifted, who are like, why am I not gifted? So on both sides, it's, I think, a useless concept with very much negative implications. And about the first question, remind me, what was the group assessment? Yes, yeah, definitely. That's why I think like universalizing, like abstractizing, if that's a word, of like these characteristics that you want to measure doesn't make sense. In the same way that, you know, you have relational ethics, like feminist relational ethics, where they say, okay, you can say this decision is moral or this person is moral per se. You have to see it in a specific context, like a decision makes sense in a specific context, in another one would make more sense. A person can act morally in one situation and immorally in another. And I think that goes for this as well. You can yeah, in contact with different people and with different circumstances, we act differently, and it's very problematic trying to draw some, you know, abstract traits out of these types of things. So yeah.
I guess I want to add a little bit more on what you said about the context, because I personally don't do well in group situations. If I'm in a... Yeah, and so if anything, if you were to measure me, I would do better on an individual test. But I see the reason why it might show up more in a group assessment is that individually, maybe the impact is not a lot, but collectively, when you measure it, there's a significant difference. We do that in psychological testing, not psychological testing, I mean in statistics. The p-value will show high if there's a lot of different people involved. If you just have one sample size, that would not be enough. So I think that might be the reason causing what you've described. But I think the other aspect about assessments is that qualitative measurements, which I think Eva mentioned, are very important. Instead of measuring like whether their problem solving is better and other stuff, maybe you can interview people. You can look at how that experience of being in that group setting transformed them, and you could learn more. And I just feel like certain measurements are just limited because they're so quantitative. Secondly, about the stupidity aspect, I think the most intelligent or truly gifted people, they're the most stupid, or they're the most able to be fools. And you need to have that kind of childlike wonder, the spirit that I was trying to explain in my talk, to be able to do anything of significance. And obviously, I know, Eva, you want this notion of giftedness to kind of end. I think it would be a good progression given where we are currently. But I don't think completely doing away with individual abilities is good, because it is very important to know who you are. And I think knowing your abilities, what you can, maybe it is bad to market everything and think about what you can do as a job, but a lot of people are unhappy in what they're doing in their life. And in order to find meaning and purpose, you have to know what you're truly able to do, what you're truly capable of, and what comes naturally to you. And so that's where I think looking at abilities, trying to measure for where you might be more naturally suited, might be a good thing, but obviously I understand that giftedness as a notion is pretty problematic. So,
thank you. More questions? Yeah. Well, no, let's go. Yes, over there.
This might not be a question. Based on the discussion that's happening, I'm really not pleased about people being called stupid, because here we see, we get a sense of superiority. I'm intelligent and you're stupid. At the end of the day, what we need to do is look at normative constructs what is normal in one context, what is normal in another, what one person is exposed to, what another person is exposed to. We're all different individuals. We all have different realities. And this is something that we need to take into consideration. And I'm going back to your question about skills and talent. It's about the skills that we get the opportunity to develop. And sometimes in these spaces, we have to, I really enjoyed your presentation, and this is the sort of thing that you're trying to address. So at the end of the day, we have to be a lot more sensitive and conscious about the language we use and how we view others, because sometimes we tend to perpetuate injustice through these discourses. Thank you.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I think, obviously, I understand that it's a normative way to talk about intelligence or just somebody is stupid, and those words are not good labels. But I guess what he was talking when he mentioned stupidity, it was this kind of the fool archetype, if you've seen what that archetype is. It's somebody who knows that I know nothing, this Socrates aphorism. And if you don't acknowledge that, I don't think you can ever learn. You need to have that kind of openness to experience. Maybe not having this kind of self-depreciating view that you're stupid, but that maybe perhaps I don't know everything. And I don't think that's a negative way to think about it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for saying, I was being completely ironic with my language.
Yeah. And
stupid. I mean, it was like a way of criticizing the whole idea of stupidity and intelligence. And it's absolutely contextual. That's the idea. I mean, people who go outside for councils or anything, not they become stupid. But that's the point. Some people look at you and they think you're stupid. This is the whole point. How can we still think that someone is stupid because they don't have communication skills or something like that? That's the whole point. I mean, I agree with you. Being, how do you say? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for your comment, and I agree with you, but I also think that just language is a living thing, that you can just like take some expressions out of it. And even if we continue saying stupid or intelligent in this like colloquial way and like knowing what we actually mean, isn't, even if we stop using intelligence as this, objective criteria in education, blah, 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 we're going to still keep like, for example, there are words like hysteric that are completely, unjust and based on like discrimination of women. But even I sometimes say you're acting hysteric because like it's just, taking away the power from a word exactly doesn't mean that it can stay part of. We should be aware of it and we should keep aware of these things. But I think it's not the core of the issue.
Thank you for the presentation.
Is it working? Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
My question is for Eva, right? Very fascinating project, I think. I was wondering, do you have some kind of philosophical or theoretical framework you're working with? That's my first question.
Theoretical framework.
Yeah, I mean, theoretical I did a lot with Richard Apple, so like critical pedagogy in general, that would be the theoretical framework, and also Marxist analysis, because I have this like materialist view of like what is it in like the material basis of life that produces these differences, and then how this superstructure also like recreates these differences from the beginning. So it's a mix of different, I don't know if that would but also I'm not really an expert on this. This is not like my master's or my PhD or anything. It's kind of a little side project, so not too deeply into it.
Okay, I understand, but it's very, very important project. And it was fun that you were comparing, saying you're wanting to become like Sweden. I tried to express some warning yesterday, but it's interesting with this purpose thing. Why do you want to promote and find those children early that are intelligent. And the purpose, I think, come to the competition even between countries in the end.
Yeah.
And now in Sweden, I can tell you, I listened to a research project that when they are engaging with preschool teachers, the researchers are engaging with preschool teachers, trying to help them to support their findings of children and learning practices that is supposed to increase development and learning. And then they use the autism criteria for finding, not intelligence, but those criteria for finding behaviors that how could you put it? Isn't good for learning. For example, you are trying to stimulate the children to have adequate attention. That's what we're talking about. To have don't look aside, look at the thing strictly in the body. I think that's very scary. And I was thinking, then the preschool teacher on the floor had a problem to do this because they didn't understand the purpose. Why do I have to direct the gaze? Why do I have to try to teach the child to direct the gaze in the same way? So I wonder, my question is, how do you think about the connection between feeling of purpose and those educational techniques that these thoughts are leading to?
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning when I said that's a problem with giftedness and with just thinking in these terms that you have a purpose in life, that is your authentic purpose, that you just have to identify, and then you have to follow this path until you are fulfilled. I mean, there is no one...
The teachers,
when they are using some tool, like whether they think that this tool really has a purpose.
Persons trying to help children find themselves, developing themselves, and going into a declining mental state. And I think that the people did have a problem with that because they themselves didn't feel a purpose to be worthy. They didn't understand. Why should we help these people just finding themselves? Here you perhaps can see we want to be like Sweden. We want to have better material standards or something like that. That is an important purpose, of course. But then you get in Sweden, in many preschools, the preschool teachers, they're just in the place when they have to help the children to, as individuals, become super successful and have dreams about being Elon Musk or something like that. So the sense of purpose, I'm not having a hard time expressing the feeling, but all this conference I have been feeling a kind of lack of understanding the feeling of purpose in the teacher's activity.
Yeah,
existential.
I mean, yeah, it's problematic that we have this narrative of like trying to be like Sweden and idealizing everything that goes on there, including this type of raising of children in a very individualistic, very goal attainment type of way. That I guess you have criticisms of that also coming from the teachers. Yeah, it's just this type of, and it's becoming more and more common. In Croatia as well, just like seeing national development as a burden of individuals who have to, find their purpose and then do it very well, and then we're all gonna, advance as a society, where it's it's much more complex and much more structure dependent than that. Like, yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah.
I want to add a little something. I guess I disagree with both of you in that I do think the teacher's purpose is to help the student realize their purpose. But the way I see that happening is that, you don't focus on extrinsic motivational factors like grades and stuff like that, and you allow for a student's interest to take them anywhere. And the purpose doesn't have to be like one essential thing and they will stick to it throughout their life, but that whatever they're doing it authentically, and the engagement between the student and the teacher is authentic. So just focusing on authenticity, in my opinion, can make the entire process a little bit more meaningful and purposeful. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, question here.
Wow, such a discussion, very intense. But I would like to drop, a little bit of skepticism, particularly in the direction of the first presentation, and my question will be addressed to the first speaker. Speaking about creativity. It's a very deep and interesting topic. I understand that, you've presented a lot of research and the whole list of literature. But one thing, I believe that one thing is missing that is related to the contemporary issue of creativity and education. And this issue is growing right now. And the guys from the other side of the river, those who are sitting right now in Microsoft Office, in Yandex Office, they are doing it quite successfully. I mean, they are changing the whole paradigm. I'm talking about the artificial intelligence and particularly about the role of it in creativity. And right now, I understand that the idea of creativity in your presentation is built all around the personality, individual creativity, and the education that stimulates. Recently, I read a message from the chief AI officer of the University of Sacramento. He wrote that, universities face huge challenge. University essays are no more of any use. It's not a creative piece of writing anymore. So just let's cross it out. So my question is, how can we be able to stimulate, to continue that individual creativity boost in the times when pushing the button is the answer?
Yeah.
So how to motivate when you can have all bunch of creative products, and I particularly mean you were talking about productivity. Well, you cannot be productive without that.
Sure. I guess our world is changing a lot. The first thing I want to say is that AI cannot experience transformation. So I guess AI is not truly creative given my definition of the framework, because it already has that information. It's not discovering anything new. So for us, what is creative is the process of learning something, having this belief revision. When we didn't know something, we were confused, we had this arousal. So obviously, I don't think AI is creative in this individual sense. Secondly, I think there is a way in which our human creativity is extended through this technological space, which is not necessarily bad. I actually wrote a while back on psychoanalysis and generative art. And my premise was that there is a way in which it can take you away from this creative drive. It can put you in the cycle of desire and demand. And that is perhaps because technology is very divorced from this kind of internal personalized experience, and then you're just caring about the product. And that's why I focused so much about the process. And I think there's a way in which, if you look at the process view, you can take all of these technological advancements and still maintain a sense of individual creativity. The way that happens is that obviously you're putting prompts, you're doing other things, but you're not using the tool in a way just to give you an end product. And I think obviously it's very easy to do that. You want 100% on the grade, you're going to put that in. But I think education as an institution, they've taken measures to make assessments that don't just allow you to put something in ChatGPT and turn in a paper, because that wouldn't yield anything. Obviously people are using that these days, but I've seen even in my courses, teachers have come up with creative ways, and so they're using their own creativity to help us use AI. So AI is not like don't use it. Use it, it's a good tool, but in a way that it stimulates your creative drive. So you're using components of technology of these products, but you're also having in-class components and other ways to just integrate that new technological advancement. Obviously, I'm a little bit scared. I'm worried about this dystopic technological future. I hope that doesn't, like, you know, make us lose our essence, our souls, our creative spirits. But I'm pretty hopeful that we can find a way to make it work with our sense of individual humanistic development with this technological advancement. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Do we have time? Do we have another question?
Yeah, we have a lot of time.
I want to take the time of the... I'm just thinking about the thing about the AI and creativity, and thinking about the discussion we were having before about stupidity and things. I was thinking about, for example, pieces of work we agreed that are creative, like, I don't know, Kafka's literature or Francis Bacon's paintings, and they they were doing something wrong at the time. I mean, by the patterns or the parameters of art, they were down. They were not intelligent artists or writers. And I think that the AI cannot do that, because the answers of the AI are always right. The point of the AI is to get it right, to get it the right answer, not to be wrong. The problem for me is, and yeah, we can just keep doing wrong, but the problem for me is that we don't. You see, all movies, all literature, all educational environments and productions have this AI pattern nowadays. You see movies and you see, yeah, they use ChatGPT to write the script. I mean, and the question for me would be, how can we preserve, I won't say stupidity, but how can we preserve this minor kind of thinking, this non-intelligent, this possibility or condition to make mistakes, to deviate from the parameters. This is the educational issue for me of the century. This is tricky. I don't know how to.
Actually, I never covered this in my presentation, but one of the recommendations I had was free association, which is something I don't think AI can necessarily do. So a particular way in which we can retain this sense of creativity is allowing people to make random associations with things that may or may not be correct, and encouraging students to do that. Obviously, there were a lot of other recommendations. I don't know which ones align with this perspective. That's all I can remember. But say right now, we're just discussing. Obviously, if we had a computer right now, we could perhaps stimulate the discussion the way we're discussing it, but we're not afraid to say certain things. And I think just having an environment where we allow for people to have free associations, just say whatever is on their mind in schools and other places, can somewhat preserve it. I don't know if that's like the best answer. That's just what I could come up with. Do you have any recommendations?
Sorry. Do you have something to add?
I could just, it's not so connected. It's just a thought. There is a book by Michael Sandel called Tyranny of Merit. It's a critique of meritocracy, and it's kind of connected to what you just said about how in a specific context something can be rewarded, but actually a few years later we realize it was wrong, and the opposite, about how in a meritocracy, even if we take the assumption that the ones with most merit will be the most successful, that's still problematic, because what is merit? It takes talent, which is, as we mostly think of it, innate, so you didn't earn it, and it takes a context in which this talent is seen as something valuable, which is very much time and space specific and contextual. So that's also not something that you earned, but you have the luck to live in a society which recognizes your talent as something that should be rewarded. So this is like Kafka wouldn't be, and does that mean that he doesn't have merit, for example? So just
It's going back to the whole idea of AI. I teach students how to use AI ethically, and it takes quite a lot of creativity, because these things hallucinate, they give wrong information, they do not get everything right, and it is for the students to be judicious and engage with the content that it is that they are trying to produce. I think AI is an amazing tool that can make our lives easier, and I like using it. I've used it to generate images, and just by the prompt, just by the specificity of the prompt or missing words from the prompt, you can actually generate different images. So I think the notion of creativity and AI, by using it ethically and by trying to construct your imagination, you know, what it is that you imagine through AI, I think it is something that can actually work in our favor.
That's actually awesome, because I think there's a lot of ways in which we're deficient, and that's how I see AI integrating into our human creativity, is that it gives us, or makes us a prosthetic god, which Freud talks about, where we're technologically becoming more capable than we're naturally capable, but it's, if anything, not taking away from what we actually want to do. For example, I know a friend who has aphantasia. She can't visualize a lot of things, but perhaps maybe she could use a prompt and then an image would pop up. And so something she can't do, she's able to do through the help of AI, which is pretty awesome. Do you have anything?
Yeah. May I ask a question about your experience of using AI with your students, particularly for pictures? Well, my question is whether you were exercising creativity in producing images or in producing text about images, which is very different from any painter's or like artist's point of view. So was it like artistic creativity, aesthetics, or just exercising correct prompt engineering, like designing a text?
That's a hard one.
It's usually, it's quite a bit, because even on my presentation today, there's an image there that AI helped me to generate, and the authors are me and Microsoft designer, because it helped me. But the students tend to use this not for art, but for aesthetic generation, as well as for text, because the AI can help them to structure their work, plan their work, sort of, and give, especially for second language speaker, it helps with the punctuation and grammar and so on. So what I do is I have a list of questions, what you shouldn't ask AI to do and what you can ask them to do. So they get specific guidance on how to use it, so that although it's an assistive technology, at the end of the day, it is still their work due to the engagement and the content that is produced.
So it's text.
Text and images.
Well, the result is images, but they are involved in the production of text.
Oh, the input. The input is a prompt. So I do work with them on the prompt. So how to make the prompt, how to get the AI to give them what it is that they want or what it is that they conceive.
Okay. Any other questions? If well, I actually have. Yes, I have a question. I have a question to Eva and maybe to Rayan if she has something to add to that. So let's assume that you're absolutely right, and your concept is somehow accepted. Well, just a sort of experiment. Yes, but in our world we live in the economic society where everything is based on numbers. Well, most things. Okay, let's not say everything, but most things are based on numbers. And let's say you want to change it somehow, and you want to move to some, I don't know, assessment system that would not be what are the criteria, at least before what are the criteria? How can you measure, I don't know, not even merit, but how can you measure what resources go where in means of education, in means of, so if it's not intelligence, yes, how can you do that? Is there any numerical way of doing that? Because I'm not sure that deep qualitative assessment is possible right now in terms of the whole system. I mean, the economy, because, well, your presentation reminded me of the video from famous animation from Ken Robinson about put into categories academic thinking, non-academic thinking. Well, if you're not familiar, I will send you a link, but it's classics. And well, if we are wrong about that, what can we do to be right? I mean, in very general. So how can we move this direction? Practically?
Yeah, well, first of all, just moving the emphasis away from the need to assess and to select those that we will support, just making, as I said, education accessible to everyone and making classes more creative for everyone and more advanced. There was this project that it was called Bright Idea, I think, in America, that took the curriculum that was specifically developed for gifted children, and they applied it to all of the children in some school, and all of the children really benefited from it and developed their interpersonal skills, their creativity, and so many positive things. So why should we measure people and then based on that provide them something?
Well, because we have limited resources.
Yes, but
what are the other ways to distribute
the qualitative ones? The qualitative ones, it's not even a very original idea. It's what's already happening in many different ways. You have art competitions where you bring a painting and then the one who has the best painting gets some support, or it could be done for just output based on any type of human activity would be better than trying to have an objective scale. Then you push everyone into it and it's completely unjust to most people.
I agree.
Anything from you? Actually, I think there's a way in which qualitative measurements can become quantitative. We do a lot of research in psychology where we take, say, interviews, we put them into themes, and then we categorize them, and then we can score them. There's a lot of ways in which you can, at least the measurement component is not numbers. Eventually, you can translate it into numbers if it's useful. Obviously, it's very time-consuming and demanding, but I'm saying it would not be completely out of the picture to have qualitative measurements and still be able to use numbers. Okay. And so they're not mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's even one more.
But who determines what intelligence is and who is intelligent?
Very political question. Yes. Right. That's a very open one. Okay. I think. Well, do you? No? Yeah. Okay.
I would just say in particular, I guess both of us agree that we need to do away with this focus and emphasis of the notion of intelligence. It's not benefiting anybody. Obviously, we can recognize people and what they're doing, but some other way of identifying it besides intelligence. So I guess that's the conclusion of our topic today.
Okay. Never-ending story. No, I'm just thinking now, suddenly, that creativity also is becoming some kind of sign that we fight for here. And I think creativity is life for me, and AI is not life. Yeah. I just wanted to say that so we don't think that AI is creativity. No, I decide that that definition.
Yeah, I guess I said that in my talk, that creativity is an attitude towards life, which is something you definitely need for anybody to be creative. And at the same time, it is the experience of creativity that transforms us, which I don't think AI can experience, which is very important. And I guess I would never call AI creative. I wouldn't even call it intelligent. I wouldn't call it conscious. I wouldn't call it even capable of understanding, even though people might argue that. So,
okay. I think that's here we will wrap up. Thank you very much to both our presenters. You actually kept the audience as 3. So that was very nice, productive discussion. And yeah, thank you very much.